I now recognize Ms. Lesko from Arizona for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both of you for being here to testify. I'm first going to ask, the same question first of Dr. Gary. In your documented emails to to Dr. Fauci and others, dated before or around the same time as the February 1st conference call, both of you seemed absolutely convinced that COVID-19 was not from nature. In fact, Dr. Anderson, when you spoke to committee staff, when they interviewed you, you were very concerned about the origin of COVID-19 and wondered if you should contact the FBI or CIA about your concern. Yet, on February 4th, 2020, which was 3 days after the conference call, Dr. Jeremy Farah sent an email to Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins. It says, quote, "Please treat in confidence a very rough first draft from Eddie and team. They will send on the edited, cleaner version later, pushing WHO again today." Dr. Gary, is this the very rough first draft referring to the proximal origin paper?
It was a report that was going to go back to the original people on the teleconference. Were there elements in that report that we eventually incorporated into proximal origins? Yes, but it wasn't a draft of that paper per se. We hadn't even decided whether we were going to write one or not.
How much of, Dr. Gary, how much of that original draft do you think was included in the published proximal origin paper?
I haven't sat down and compared the two documents, so I don't really know how to answer that.
Thank you. Dr. Anderson, I have the same question for you. Was that first draft of the proximal origin paper on February 4th?
I think it's important to understand what our conclusions were in the particular
Sir,
draft.
could you answer the question?
Is that
Was it your understanding that it's the proximal origin paper?
This is not the proximal origin paper, as Dr. Gary stated. This is a draft report based on our discussion so far, and we conclude that we believe deliberate engineering can be ruled out with a high degree of confidence. But we also state that
that was on February 4th.
This is on February 4th.
4th, you thought
Correct.
that it could be ruled out. The
Deliberate. Importantly, we talk about deliberate engineering. However, I want to point out that we also specifically mentioned that the current data are consistent with all three, meaning the three scenarios that we described in the final paper.
Dr. Gary, my next question, you told Congresswoman Malliotakis that there was new evidence she said, in the 3 days before your scientist team sent an initial draft of proximate origin. You said that that was not really the original draft, but had pieces of it. Is it normal for a scientist to totally change? Because I read your email from, I think it was February 1st, said, this can't be nature, this is, basically, I'm paraphrasing, too coincidental, this couldn't all line up together. To change in 3 days, is that normal?
So I think we need to step back a little bit from that one email. That was one email that I sent, amongst literally hundreds of communications with my co-authors, with other scientists, other people I was talking to about the origins. And in that particular email that you're talking about, I was doing what scientists very often do, and that is, take a devil's advocate position. So the questions that we were trying to answer is, could this have come from a laboratory? And I was taking that position.
Thank you, sir. I have 42 seconds left. I have a very important question for both of you that I'm trying to understand. So Dr. Redfield told us in March of 2023 this year that either the Wuhan Institute of Virology or China itself deleted the COVID sequence in September of 2019. He also said that they turned over control of the WIV in September of 2019 to the military, Chinese military. He also said that the WIV changed the ventilation at their lab in the fall of 2019. If China wasn't trying to cover up something, why would they do this? Both of you.
You know, I'm not a member of the Intelligence Committee. Don't have privileged information in terms of what was going on there. I really don't have any basis to answer.
But you don't think it's unusual for China to cover up things if nothing happened, if it was all natural?
Well, I'm also not an expert on Chinese politics, so I really don't have a professional answer for you there.
Dr. Anderson.
All of this seems routine to me. The fact that you have a BSL-4 laboratory getting their air conditioning units upgraded, for example, seems unrelated, as the intelligence community has also concluded, is that is unrelated to the later
How
emergence of the
about
virus.
turning over to military control or to delete the COVID sequence?
So-
Is that just normal?
I have
Procedure?
no comments on the first. I think it's important to understand that the deletion you're talking about is specifically about a database, not actually the SARS-2 sequence itself. And that database has been on and off and seemed to finally be taken offline in February of 2020, not actually in September 2019. Also, we know that this pandemic very likely started in the mid to late November 2019. So I think with quite a lot of certainty, we can say that these events are unrelated.
Well, that seems very unusual to me, and I yield back. Thank you.